And we're back. You guys probably, hopefully, you already saw the first episode of Chuck's Rawversations, where we talked with Ben here about his the harrowing details of what happened at the G20 Summit. Can you tell us just a little bit about yourself, Ben?
Yeah, small town kid from Ontario. Um, Grew up believing basically the story I was told throughout my entire life. And as we've seen, and for anybody that's watched the video, as you've seen, the story is very different than the reality. And I kind of encountered it face first.
And what story is that? What story is it that you were told? Because I don't think we're all told the same story necessarily.
The state is your friend. They're working for you, and they have your best interests at heart. Police are just protecting you from dangerous elements. Basically, various different versions of "there's nothing to see here."
Yeah. So, as a reminder, because of course there was 2 hours of us talking before,
Yep.
I'm gonna quickly catch us up to what happened. Basically, this time 10 years ago, so I believe it was June 26th, 2010.
Yes, June 26th, 2010. Yes.
June 26th, 2010. We went to, or you were in downtown Toronto. You were trying to get to work. You saw that, you knew that the G20 protests were happening. You tried to get through, and then as you got there, you realized, screw it, I want to be a part of this. Is that correct so far?
Well, I would say I witnessed violence perpetrated by law enforcement and decided that that's not the kind of place I want to live in, and I had a reason to stay.
So you stuck around. You found yourselves herded by police officers in front of Queen's Park.
Correct.
There you were attacked. You were pulled out specifically by law enforcement. You were beaten rather brutally. Your nose was broken, and they fucked up your shoulder, right?
Among other things, yes.
Ripped up your clothes and etc. They tackled you. They had you tied up. They took you off. You moved around from place to place to place to place. And now we're starting with you ending up basically at processing, where they were going to give you your phone call, your food, your water, take care of you, all that sort of thing. Does that sound about right?
Yep. I arrived at the warehouse where they had everybody, this giant sprawling space. They took my information. I saw a doctor. I got cleaned up and gave my testimony. Was strip searched. And then, I was taken to a spot to wait for my phone call, basically.
Okay. Before we move on, normally whenever you see a video like this, they're like, hey, subscribe to the channel. Don't worry about the channel. Fucking, like, don't worry about it. What you find here has nothing to do with what we're talking about right now. So really what's important to me and to Ben right now is talk about it. Share this video, comment on the video, show it around to people who you think would be interested in it. Of course, check out the first one if you haven't checked this one, but this video is what's important, not everything else that's going on. So, Ben, from where you were, let's continue on.
Right. Well, before I get started, I just wanted to add to what you just said. I'm not interested in people talking about my story. The thing I want to highlight by telling this story is that this happened to over 1,000 people in a 24-hour period. And I am just one set of eyes. I'm also witness to one single event, and it's a big ass continent, and we have been doing this for a while. So I want this to be an opportunity for people to educate themselves by learning what one white kid experienced. That's kind of what I'm hoping for.
Yeah. So, and this was 10 years ago in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, which really makes you feel like this can happen anywhere. I think that's really that's an important statement too. It can, and now at this point, maybe even has.
Probably, yeah, at some point, yeah. I mean, we can get into that a little deeper after the fact, but certainly there are places in Canada that it's still happening right now. They're just not in large urban centers. So so at this point, I've arrived at this gate. I've met a very jovial, friendly sergeant who's kind of, giving us the lay of the land. He's telling me, we get food, we get water. We're going to wait in a cell for a while. There's a lot more people. They didn't expect this to happen. I was told that repeatedly. And eventually I'll get a phone call. I can call who I like. I can talk as long as I like. And then when that's done, we'll start the hurry up and wait thing to get taken to the courthouse.
And it's funny, and I don't mean to break in this early, but
Sure.
it's funny because something you mentioned in the last video was how surprised you were with the planning. They had all these Greyhound buses ready, and they were already caged, and you already had the cages set up like they knew that you guys were coming. And
Yeah.
so to have these officers say, "Oh, well, we didn't know it was going to be like this," and you're looking around, you're like, "You were ready for us."
Well, I kind of put all that stuff together after the fact. When I started, the first thing I did when I got home was I started writing my testimony down. So while it was fresh in my mind, which is part of the reason why I have it so clear in my head now. And I read it over several times over the years, just to remind myself of the things that I might have forgotten. Because obviously this is a pivotal moment in my life, one of the defining ones. So I guess at the time I was just I was exhausted, I was beaten up, and just hoping to get home, hoping to survive this thing. So it didn't really click until later, but I wanted to make sure that people understand there's way too many moving parts in this for this to be accidental. The cops were very insistent, though, throughout the whole thing, that this was not what they expected. And you know what? Maybe they weren't expecting it. I know a thing or two about how information travels from the top to the bottom. Who knows, right? So anyway, I passed through this gate and put in a cell. It's me and two other folks. We waited. I lost all sense of time after this, so we waited a while. And one of the guys in this cell with me was unstable, so I had to keep my distance. The reason I bring this up is when you think about mass arrests, I don't know what percentage of the population have a significant enough mental illness to manifest in regular life, but let's say it's 1%. You arrest over 1,000 people, you're getting a good handful of them. I'm pointing this out to highlight how it becomes dangerous for both the prisoners or the detainees to be kept in a cage together, depending on what's happening. And when it's that large a group, it becomes harder and harder for people to keep track of who's who, and people slip through the cracks. So this guy, luckily, he was pretty chill, but I know that can turn on a dime, and he was, mumbly, if you know what I mean. Made me a little uncomfortable, made me a little concerned for my safety, being in a cage, right? So I just kept my distance. At some point, these two guys disappear. They get taken out by a cop and taken for their phone call, I'm assuming. And I'm left alone. Now, it's really cold in here. The cops are all still in their full uniforms and armor, so they're overheating. So to compensate, they crank the AC in this place. So I don't know how cold it was, but I know that I've worked in kitchens. I've done inventory in a freezer. I can tolerate cold, and I'm like shivering. Like I can't keep my temperature up. So I decide I'm just going to rest and try and stay warm. So I take my ripped up shirt, it's in like 5 different pieces, kind of wrap it around my face and try and keep my heat in from my breath. And I laid there for a while. I don't know how long, like on the stone floor. before I was woken up by an officer and taken into a room. The room was really dark, and there were 2 payphones and 2 police officers. The police officer picked the phone up off of the the holster or whatever, dialed a number, handed me the phone. And I said, hold on, I get to call who I want. And he said, no, you don't. I said, no, but the guy, he's like, I don't give a shit what you were told. If you don't pick up this phone, you don't get a phone call. So I grabbed the phone, and they had dialed legal aid. So I spoke to someone whose name I can't recall, and they took my information. They, this is like the 4th time I've given my information at this point. And I give them my mom's phone number because my mom and I had a deal when I was a kid. She told me, if you ever get arrested and it wasn't your fault, you give me a call anytime, day or night, and I'll be there to take care of you. But if you screw up and you get caught, you're on your own. So I had this going through my head when I gave him my mom's number. I'm like, I hope she remembers this conversation. I really hope she remembers this conversation.
I think she must have, because my mom and I had the exact same conversation. So maybe that's like, and I've had the same conversation with my oldest too. So
right. Like a boilerplate parenting thing.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that came in the package.
Right, totally. Yeah, it's like IKEA parents, right? So I give them that information. They ask if I have a lawyer or any legal representation. I'm like, no, I'm poor, no way. So they said they'd have a lawyer there to represent me, and that I would be in contact with them prior to my appearance in court. And phone call cuts off. Guy grabs my shoulder, keeps pushing. Out I go. Got put in another cell with a handful of people. So now the cells are looking like dog kennels. There's like between 10 and 20 of us, depending on which cell I end up in. I moved probably once an hour, maybe once every couple hours. Again, I'm losing time. There's no light. There's no. They took my phone and my wallet. Like, I don't have anything. So we're just kind of like guessing. And I met a lot of really interesting people throughout this process. I think the reason why they kept rotating us from cell to cell was to keep us from getting acquainted. But all it did was get us to solidify what was actually going on in the city at the time, because everybody came from somewhere different. Over 1,000 people were dealt with throughout the entirety of this event, and they came from all over Toronto, all over the downtown area. I can give you like a short list of some of the more common stories I can give you. I heard, and then there's some that are really interesting as well. So I heard a lot. I was just going to the store, and next thing I know, I'm surrounded by cops. I heard I was going to work. I was going home from school. My baby needed formula. I heard, I was coming back from the doctor. Pretty much anything that you can think of that you would normally do walking to and from your home, just all of a sudden cops show up and grab them. So it's a very chilling thought.
Yeah.
That not only did they have all these hundreds of cops at Queen's Park, swinging at every skull they could find, they have enough people to roam the downtown streets and catch anybody who's trying to get baby formula. It's insane, the level of mobilization that was going on that day.
Yeah. Well, I remember last episode you were also talking about the picnicking family. So that was another one that really got to me and really like, oh crap, can you imagine just sitting around? So yeah, all of that really rings true and is just
families.
Insane. Yes.
Many families, probably at least half a dozen. So this just came out of nowhere. for a lot of people, myself included. So, as I'm rotated, I'm meeting a lot of really interesting people. One of the stories that I heard that was really got my, it more scared me after I came out, because you got to understand, some of these people, I hate to put it this way, and I don't mean any sort of generalization, but some of them look like criminals, and some of the people that got caught were legitimately causing trouble. So I take this stuff with a grain of salt sometimes until I have more evidence. There were a few people that obviously, like they'd been caught with their pants down. They were just blindsided by the whole thing. They didn't look like they'd ever even, talked to a cop, let alone sat in a detention cell. So, when they tell you their story, you're like, yeah, it's believable. But one guy told me he was walking down the street, down Queen Street, and it was empty. So there was a curfew at this time. No one was allowed out downtown. That's really important to know. So this fellow was walking down Queen Street, and he sees a cop car drive up and stop in the middle of the road. And the two cops get out and just walk away. Just leave the car alone. Middle of the road. They didn't pull over. Nothing. Just there, and they fuck off. So a guy sees this and he's like, "That's kind of weird." And crowds start to form, and people are kind of like, calling their friends on their phones, that kind of shit. And next thing you know, someone shows up with a gas can, guy in a mask, pours it over, lights are up, and that cop car is probably the one that everybody's seen on YouTube or on the news. It was on the front page of a couple newspapers the next day. That was the car. So I didn't realize when this guy was telling me the story, I'm like, that's sketchy, dude. Like, I don't know. I'm putting together what happened to me. I'm starting to get wise to, like, they had all these buses, they had this warehouse, like that's starting to click now. And this guy tells me the story. I'm like, maybe it's true. And then I come out and I see the front page and I'm like, okay, there it is. Some of the other folks that I met were, out to protest. They were out to cause trouble, and they were very honest about that. But they didn't even get to. They were surrounded before they could do anything. No one talked to them. No one asked them where they were going. It was just, you're downtown, bye. And they were, smacked and thrown in the back of a car. I was probably the most injured person that I encountered. So my guess is that people that got hit as hard as I did probably went to the hospital for the most part. And there were a fair amount of females as well, but I have no idea what their story was or what happened to them, because we were kept separate. Men and women were separated. So you'd have to find another female survivor of this thing to find that side of story. Eventually, there was one particular guy who he really made me think about things differently. He was Persian. He was from Iran, and we were all kind of standing around and doing the, I hate to put it this way, but doing the the white people complaints, like it's cold and all I got was a cheese sandwich, and how long is this gonna last? Like, I have shit to do. I have to go to work. Stuff that really shouldn't be on your mind when you're in this kind of situation. Mm-hmm. And eventually he was like, y'all are so lucky, man. It's like, where I come from, there'd be no trial. We would have already been lined up in front of a firing squad. And that would have been that. He said, Iran doesn't keep prisoners. And kind of freaked me out. I was like, how far are we from this? I saw the way those cops were looking at me, the way they beat me, and I'm thinking, how many steps from there to firing squad? I don't know. But it really got the gears turning, started freaking me out. So eventually we left. We got put in a big wagon again, and there's a bunch of us. There's probably 8 to 10 of us in that space. And as we're driving out, I hear like just loud, like bang, 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 all over the side of the. It's just like hundreds of hands all banging on the side of this van, and we all kind of go, "What the hell?" And then it's done, and we're off on the street, and we're like, "What the fuck was that?" One of the guys there, he's like, "Oh, that's probably the media." And he's like, "Yeah, I think they know what's going on." And one of the people was like, "How would you know anything? Like, what makes you so special?" He's like, "I'm a producer for CTV." It's like they made a huge fucking mistake arresting me because I'm supposed to be on site for the morning show, and they are probably all over this right now. So anyway, got to know that guy. He was a really friendly, really nice dude, and the whole time he was like, "They fucked up, and everyone's gonna know." So I think we can probably thank him for some of the more honest coverage that happened after the fact. I'm sure his voice was quite loud about making sure that the truth was declared. But even then, a lot of it was kept out of the public eye, and still has been. So,
yeah, I found being on the outside looking in, there was less answers and more questions. So it was just like the media asking questions like, why is this? Why is that? What's going on here? And you're like, yeah, why is that? And we didn't really get those answers.
Right. Well, you know who's supposed to do that investigating?
Yeah.
The cops.
Yeah.
So, yeah, probably taking their time. So yeah, so we go to the courthouse. So again, we're all the way across the city. So I think I caught some shut-eye, to be honest with you. I can kind of sleep anywhere. And at this point, we're past the 24-hour mark that I've been, awake. So I just probably just rested a bit. And then we arrived at the courthouse and got put in like an actual cell, like a holding cell. No more of this prefab, pre-made prison stuff. This is the real deal wrapped in concrete.
Oh, you've gone uptown. Good for you.
Oh yeah. Moving on up. So we're still chatting and trying to figure out what's going on, waiting for our time to get through. Eventually, we each get individually kind of taken out and spoken. We get to speak to a lawyer. My lawyer didn't know my name. I had to explain the details of my situation to them, which, obviously this is not how it's supposed to be. They're supposed to be brushed up. I honestly don't know, and this is not meant in any negative way towards legal aid, but I don't know if this person was sober. They were very unclear on what was going on, and not quite lucid. I felt like I was leading the charge on this. Like that was not a good feeling.
Is it possible that was like, say, someone straight out of law school or someone still in law school, like pre-law or something like that?
Well, I think in retrospect, now that I can look back at this, I would say that this highlights the way that funding is sort of misappropriated. That the fact that we can finance this mass incarceration without blinking an eye, but we can't afford proper legal representation for those who were incarcerated, kind of shows where our priorities and our values lie in terms of funding. So that's an issue that we should be thinking about. If we're going to say as a society that people deserve their day in court, it can't just be their day. It needs to be properly represented in front of an impartial entity with your rights intact. And if we can't do that, then then we got to stop saying it at the very least. That's kind of my thing. I just want some honesty about it all, you know? So I spoke to this lawyer, and I kind of made me more nervous. I'm not going to lie. I started thinking, okay, well, you know, everything this sergeant told me is crock. I did not get my phone call. You know, if you consider, you know, 2 pieces of Wonder Bread with a Kraft single in between them food, I did get food, but that was it for a 24-hour period. You know, 1 or 2 cups of water until I got to the courthouse. And inside our holding cell, there was a water fountain, fortunately, so we were able to drink. But beyond that, like, I felt like they had just basically tossed me on, you know, they beat me up and then, you know, forced me to climb a hill, was how it felt.
Yeah.
At some point, eventually, we're all kind of passed in and out. People are starting to go into the courthouse and then, or sorry, into the actual court itself, and they're on their way out. We don't see them again. There was only one person. I want to highlight this. There was only one person the entire time that I was there. Maybe I met over 100 people over the course of this time. One person who genuinely did something wrong. It was a young kid, like 19 maybe, and he would not tell anybody what he had done. He just sat in the corner of the holding cell and pretty much cried the whole time because he knew his life was screwed. I use that example to kind of highlight it might feel good in the moment to just go out and kind of stir some shit up when everybody else is causing trouble. But if you get caught and you actually did something wrong, consequences are very far-reaching. And I think we need to think about whether or not, like, do we want change or do we want to just kind of cause some shit? Because you can't do both. Or it's hard to do both, I should say.
Yeah.
So anyway, I got put into you know, passed through into the court and put in this booth. So the booth is like bulletproof glass up top, and it, you know, you feel like a violent offender when you're inside it. There's me and 3 other dudes. One of them is the dude from Iran, who's boy, does he talk to cops like he doesn't like cops, man. He's a real loudmouth. And so he's immediately just like full on, like, this is a miscarriage of justice. This is complete bullshit. I will not stand for this. I know my rights, and I will not stand for anything less than my rights. And you know, the judge is just with the gavel, just head in hand, you know, just like, can you shut up? And I relate to the dude. I really do. I'm on his side, you know, like this situation is not the way it should go. But this is the guy that decides whether you go home or not. So, I mean, you're picking a fight with the wrong dude. Anyway, eventually the judge gets to me, and he, you know, there's a lawyer who's trying to speak on my behalf, and he's just got this like stack like this of papers, and he's flipping through trying to find my name, right? So you can get to me, because everybody gets 5 minutes. It's like a segment on CNN. It's insane, right? Like, you get 5 minutes to defend this one person's case, and everybody has a different story. Like, how is this even fucking possible to achieve? And they got like 7 people to do this. You know, it's crazy. Yeah. So, and you know, there's a Crown lawyer, there's a defense lawyer. For Americans, Crown is basically the state. It's essentially the same thing. So the Crown lawyer is saying, you know, declaring my charges. I've been charged with unlawful assembly, obstruction of the peace, and assault on a peace officer. So when they say assault on a peace officer, I immediately go, oh, sorry, I did a what now? And the lawyer comes over. He's like, are you disputing that charge? I was like, absolutely, I am. Look at my face. Do you think I hit a cop? And so he speaks to the judge, and he says, my defendant is claiming that no assault occurred. We would like to see testimony from the officer or some evidence to support this. So the Crown lawyer says, the officer who, the arresting officer claims that Mr. Cook took a swing at him just before he was detained. Now, these guys are in armor. And I hope I have not provided any sort of supporting evidence to the thought that I'm an idiot or that severe an idiot. You just don't hit someone in armor. It's not, first of all, it's not going to do anything. Second of all, it's probably going to bust my hand.
Yeah.
Why would I do that? So, you know, I'm furious now because, you know, add insult to injury. They've done all this horrible shit to me and to all these other people, and now they're going to lie about what I did. So now I'm like, now I'm officially a radical. Anyway, so there's some he said, she said stuff. They're arguing, and the judge finally shuts it down and says, unless you have evidence that it didn't happen, we're going to have to go. It'll get dealt with in the preliminary, whatever, yada, yada, yada. And then he puts the stipulations for bailout, which are, I am not allowed to go to another assembly for a year, lawful or otherwise. I highlight this because this is a violation of my constitutional rights as a Canadian citizen. We are legally allowed to gather in demonstration in anywhere, anytime, with any number of people, as long as it stays peaceful. That's lawful assembly. So he's basically saying you can't have your rights. Now, I can understand rights being restricted if you have been charged and convicted with a crime. But I have been charged, and there has been no court case made. So this was a massive violation for myself and for the other people involved. It didn't make sense to me at the time. So the bless his heart, the defense lawyer comes over and says, "Do you dispute that condition?" And I said, "Look at my face." I said, "I am not going to another protest for at least a year." He said, "Okay, that's fine." So he tells the judge that's okay, and then the judge says, "And you also aren't allowed south of Bloor, which is the northern border of downtown, for a week."
Where did you live at the time?
Luckily, I lived on the north end of the city. I lived at Jane and Finch.
Okay, that's right, yeah. Because if you lived downtown...
Right. Well, he had my address information, so I think this was just sort of I think this was a finger in the eye, to be honest with you. So I immediately, I'm like, I have a job at King and John. I have to be downtown to go to work. And so my defense lawyer tries to make the case that this is, you know, an overreach and unfair. And the judge basically says, if I'm going to deal with this for him, I have to do it for everybody. So I'm done with this dog and pony show. He's not allowed to set the Bloor, period, full stop. I'm not worried about his job. He can figure it out for himself. So I'm not going to argue. Well, I can't argue, right? I'm not even representing myself. This guy's representing me. So I forgot to mention, when I got in, my mom is in the room.
You did forget to mention that.
Yeah. So first thing I think is, oh, thank God she's here. The second thing I think is, why won't she look at me? She's looking right at the judge. She looks real pissed. And I'm thinking, now again, I understand. I'm an adult. I'm a man. But this is my mom. If you're going to get support from anybody, it's your mom. So, and like, again, she's the reason I'm here for all intents and purposes, not just like the birth part, but like the whole being me part. So, you know, I'm starting to get really disillusioned and depressed, more so than I was, because I thought that, like, the one beacon of this whole thing was that I could count on my mom, and now she won't even look at me. So I'm like, I'm screwed. I'm so screwed.
I want to make a guess, because I know your mom. I believe she wasn't looking at you because she couldn't look at your wounds, and she was looking at the judge because she was fucking pissed at him.
you're half right.
That's okay.
Yeah. So I was released.
Okay.
And my bail was posted by my mother. So
How much was bail, if you don't mind my asking?
oh man, I can't remember. It was 6 figures.
6 figures?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Ooh.
yeah. But here's the thing: bail is not like something you have to pay to get the person out. Bail is what it costs if I violate the conditions of my parole. So basically, it's a surety.
So your mom effectively, to be fair, your mom effectively put her house on the line, and because of that, you can't go south of Bloor. Because if you don't, she'll lose her house.
Very possibly, yeah.
Is that a fair statement?
That's a very fair statement. Yeah, if I violate the terms of my parole, which includes going south of Bloor, my mom's on the hook. So yeah, so I get released. At long last, I'm on my feet. I have no police officers watching over me. I feel the first breath of freedom in, I think it was 36 hours at that point. So to give you an idea, I was arrested at 6 p.m. and I didn't get out until the morning of the day after.
Okay. So was this on a Saturday when this happened?
I'm not sure what day of the week it was. I think it was the middle of the week, though.
Okay, so let's say it was Wednesday at 6.
Sure, I didn't get
Are
out
you
until
saying
Friday
to
morning.
get out Friday morning? Okay.
Yeah. There was just a lot going on, you know?
Yeah. That's a lot of people to get through.
Yeah. Well, it tripped me out when I found out what day it was. Because I've just been in sort of like, I'm either concussed or my eyes are closed for 2/3 of this shit. I get it. I'm like, it's Friday. Holy. And I don't know where I was in the list of names. If they're going alphabetically, everybody's super fucked because I'm C.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So I'm like, whoa.
Yeah. Pino was gonna wait a fucking while.
Yeah. Just let them know you're not coming until next month. Yeah. So I get out. I see my mom. And my mom's all business when it comes to stuff like this. Like she is so good at just handling stress. She never lets it show. So she doesn't even hug me because she doesn't want to like break down, right? So she just sees me. She goes, "Let's go," and we start walking down the hall. And I try and say something to her. I'm like, "Mom," she's like, "We'll talk about it in a minute. Let's just get out of here."
What's going through your head?
Through my head?
You're walking with your mom. She will not talk to you. I know what would go through my head. What is going through your head? She won't talk to you.
Well, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be disowned if I don't really sell this. So all I want to do is just blurt out all the stuff that I just saw so that she has a full understanding of what I've been through. And this is not about sympathy, it's just so that she knows that I wasn't the bad guy. I just want to make sure she understands I didn't do anything to deserve this. I'm also feeling extremely betrayed by the society that I have. Like, I want to, like, I have been working, like, earning money since I was 14 years old, paying taxes into this shit. I have, up until COVID, I had not received any sort of financial compensation from the government. And this is nothing against people who have. It's just that I have been very fortunate in that I haven't had to rely on that. I have been paying into the system to help other people. And I think that's a very fair trade. I have nothing against it. But every single one of those cops that was involved, from the guy who grabbed me to the ones who beat me to the one who was mouthing "I love it" at me, my pennies are in their pocket. And I am furious right now. I'm like, I can't imagine a more insulting situation than paying for my own beatdown over at this point a 20-year period. So I'm just trying to grapple with all this. I'm trying to keep my chill because the last thing I want to do is make a scene after I've been released. I don't want to do that. I'm just trying to keep myself on an even keel. But I'm definitely just betrayed, angry, and I'm feeling like the last bit of solid ground under me is slipping away because my mom won't speak to me. So I just need to get out and talk to her and hope that everything kind of works out. Now, my mom and I have been through a lot of stuff, so I'm not super stressed. I know that she'll forgive me no matter what. I don't like the look in her eyes. I don't like feeling like a criminal, and I've been feeling like a criminal for a while now. I'm starting to identify with this feeling. I need to get that out of my system. So that's kind of where I'm at. We encountered this woman in the hallway, and big ass shout out to Alice Barton. She is the lawyer that represented me. She did a fantastic fucking job throughout the entire thing. And she just walked up to my mom and I, and she said, "You need a good lawyer." And she spoke to my mom. We talked about it. She told her rate, and I said, she said the rate. My mom took the card, and as we're walking away, I was like, there's no way that I can afford her. And my mom said, we'll talk about it later. Let's just get out of here. So when my mom took the lawyer's card, I was like, okay, she's on my side. You know, this isn't an us and them scenario with my mom and I. We're good. So we just try and navigate. The place is packed. There's cops walking around. There's all sorts of parents and wives and kids just milling, looking for people they care about. Some people are like, injured like I was, and they have like an ice pack over their face, and they're just sitting on a chair, just waiting for whatever, their car to show up or whatever. And then we step out of the courthouse, and there's cameras everywhere. There's people talking everywhere. CTV, City Pulse, everybody's there. And they're asking questions and getting testimony. And I can hear people calling, like, oh, there's one. My mom's like, let's go this way. We duck the other direction. I'm not having it. I'm not talking to anybody right now. So we get to the car, my mom's car, and I get in the passenger seat, and my mom sits in the driver's seat, and she looks at me and she goes, "Are you okay?" And it strikes me in that moment that that's the first time anybody has asked me that since I was hit. And I burst into tears. I broke down for a good, like, it's the final release of tension, right? And I lost it for a good couple minutes, and then got myself straightened out. And I don't cry. It's just not something. It's not the way that I respond to negative emotion. I tend to, when I'm in a negative state, I tend to get busy. I get active, and I want to solve a problem.
And for those of you out there, I was friends with Ben when his father died, and I don't remember tears. I remember him, working through it, and you were what, like 18?
I was 17 going on 18 when he passed. Yeah.
And so, I remember that, and I remember. So when he says that this isn't some machismo bullshit, this
actually
is
let me put it in context. So August 27th, 2001, my dad passed away. August 28th, the girl I was dating at the time broke up with me. August 29th, I got in a car accident and totaled the front end of my car. I was sober. I was driving fine. The other driver was a complete maniac. I just, again, unlucky. That weekend after my dad passed was my 18th birthday. And then 9 days later was September 11th, 2001. And didn't cry. So it's not that I'm not proud of it. It's just not how I react. So for me to release, it's like it's got to be super intense. Now, at this point, I just want to get home. So we drove back to my apartment. And I was living with your brother at the time. So he saw what was going on. We had a chat, all of us, and my mom was able to convince me to go back to Tilsonburg, where she lives, to kind of ride this out for a week. I wasn't a fan. I was like, no, I need to stay. And she was like, no, this city is the last place you should be right now, and you can't even go to work. So she said, you're coming home with me, staying for a week, and you're going to call your boss in the morning. You're going to let him know you can't come in for a week. And I was like, I have worked 1 day. This guy's going to fire me for sure. And she said, well, then you're going to have to worry about that when the week is over, because you can't do anything right now. And no one's going to hire you with a face like that anyway. So I was like, okay, that's fair. It's a good point. So
And how long did the judge say that you couldn't go south of Bloor?
A week.
Was that a year as
7
well?
days.
Oh, a week. Okay.
Yeah. A year? No, that would have been impossible.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I mean, that would have been appealed immediately. There's no way it wouldn't stand up. Okay. So I packed a bunch of clothes and got in the car and drove home. My mom drove me home. And that's when I started gathering information. I had nothing but time. My mom was a teacher at the time. She's now retired. So she was at school. And my stepdad, my current stepdad, Dave, he's a IT guy for the school board. So he's at work as well. So it's just me chilling at home for like 8 hours. And I'm not really feeling the PlayStation at the moment, so I'm just on YouTube looking up as many indie videos of this event as I possibly can to just put pieces together. Because this isn't just an investigation for me. This is like I need as much information about this as possible, because I'm going to be in court, and this has all got to be in my head. At this point, I am fairly certain I can't afford a lawyer. And after the guy from Legal Aid that I met, I'm like, I should probably just read the book and go represent myself. I just don't have faith in the way the system is functioning right now. So I spent probably 3 or 4 days reading over this stuff. We went to the hospital. A doctor looked at my nose and he said, basically, I waited too long and there was nothing he could do. So I just had to wait for it to heal. Now, of course, I just encountered a handful of brand new people, and I was in a very cold environment for, a while. So I got sick. I got a cold. And let me tell you, folks, there is probably nothing more painful than having a runny nose when it's broken. Yeah, so that was tough. A couple days of just dealing with that. And so for me, it's like frustration and misery are just kind of piling on top of each other, and I'm reaching a breaking point. And end of the week, my mom drives me home. I was able to get in contact with my boss, and surprisingly okay with it all. He was downtown, so I guess he saw everything that was going on. So he was like, yeah, it's fine. Don't worry. Just come back in on Monday. He said, we're closed anyway. It's not a big deal. So very lucky I didn't have to find a new job when I came back. That would have been tough. So I showed up for my new job. My face is torn up. And one of my coworkers, who I ended up befriending later on, told me, he's like, that first day, man, I thought we hired someone off the street, literally. It's like, I thought you were homeless. But I kind of made it through that. But physically I healed, but mentally I did not. Emotionally and mentally, I was scarred in a way that took years to heal. It started with rage. I was angry all the time. The reason why I was angry was I had been betrayed. I had been lied to by almost everybody that I trusted, all of the elders of my life, teachers, cops, politicians, even my parents, and they weren't aware they were participating in a lie, but they were, and that felt like a betrayal at the time. And as I gained more information, anybody, I mean, YouTube's a fairly common thing now, but this is 2010, right? So like it was still kind of an indie thing. You know, it was Charlie the Unicorn and cat videos. So, you know, there was still this sort of rabbit hole scenario if you found the right search terms. So, of course, G20 Toronto was one of those search terms at the time. And that rabbit hole led me to other larger things, which highlighted the reason why people were protesting in the first place, which was namely that the G20 meetings are almost always coincided with a ramped up militarized police presence, mass incarceration, and violence perpetrated by the state. And this you know, crazy tour travels around the world to various different cities, and people show up to protest the fact that these guys get to set up shop and turn this place into a police state for 24 to 48 hours every time they arrive. That's why people were there, is like they're tired of being the personal, you know, no one would like it if you just walked into your house. If someone just walked into your house and was like, "What's for dinner?" and sat down on the couch and started watching TV, you'd be like, "What the fuck are you doing here?" And then if you tried to cause any trouble, he just pointed a gun at you. It was like, "Get to dinner," right? And that's kind of how it feels when these guys show up in town. Is like all these cops show up, walls go up, and they tell you you're not allowed to go anywhere, even though you live here. It's not your house anymore, and that's crazy. So it creates this feedback loop that I talked about last time, where you have people who are frustrated because their rights and freedoms are being violated. They go out to protest, which is what they're told is the valid form of engagement, and the police beat the shit out of them, throw them in a cell, charge them with crimes that they didn't commit, and you know, they go home. These cops go home. These politicians, they go back to where they were from, and we're left to pick up the pieces. But every time these things happen, I'm saying this to highlight what's going on in America right now, because I pay attention, right? And you guys you're my neighbors. We're family. I think we're family. We share this continent, and we have tried very hard over the years to get along. I'm half American. My biological father's from Wisconsin, so I have a connection to that place. Beyond just, you know, you and your family, who I'm very close to as well. And you know, when this happened to me, it didn't just affect me. It affected my friends. It affected my family. It affected people who didn't even know me when they heard the story. It causes ripples throughout the lives that are affected. So this applies to every person, black, white, brown, purple, that gets beat by cops for no cause. Now, it happens way too much to people of color. But what this experience taught me, and what I was starting to reconcile with why I was so angry, is that this game of you're on the right team or you're on the wrong team, which is kind of what racism is about, that's just a tactic. When we talk about the systemic racism, it is systemic. but it is intended to foment division. The system itself, I think, is division. And racism is just one of the manifestations. Sexism is also one of the manifestations. Classism is one of the manifestations. It's a way of just keeping us split up into groups because we're much easier to control that way. And I know I'm starting to sound kind of tinfoil hatty, but I'm not saying there's some sort of global elite that's controlling everything. I don't think they're that smart. Because if they were tracking people, I wouldn't be here having this conversation. I've been quite vocal since this happened.
Yeah, you have.
Yeah, and I continue to be. But we have to understand that when we disagree about these things, we're really, like, when we argue about what to call this system of division, I think we need to start finding common ground. I think that needs to be the next step. So as I'm grappling with this, I'm having to go to court. So my mom paid for my legal bills. I didn't pay a cent. I wrote out my testimony during that week period when I was at home. I did it right away and sent it to her, to my lawyer, Ms. Barton. And I only had to make one appearance in court during my preliminary hearing, which is sort of when they decide when the actual court case. It's like selling the script to a certain degree. You know what I mean? Like this is the back of the book. This is what happened, and this is the date we're gonna talk about. So all I had to do was stand up and say who I was, and say a couple yeses and nos to the judge. And when we stepped out of the preliminary hearing, Miss Barton approached myself and my mom and said, okay, so we can go about this two ways. We can plead innocent, which she said, I believe you're innocent. But she said, if we pursue that course, you will go to court and there will not be a jury. It will just be a judge determining your case. And if he has a bad day, you could go to jail. She said, that's just the reality of the situation. Sometimes you catch a judge on the wrong side of the bed, and that's the end of that. So you're rolling the dice even though it's the right thing to do. Or you can take the plea bargain, which was 40 hours community service, and I have to keep my nose clean, have no encounters and no altercations with police for, I think it was up to 4 years. And if I can perform those two tasks, then my charges are stayed. So what that means is they're not dropped. It's kept in the record that I was charged and that the charges were stayed. But if anybody actually inquires about my criminal record, I have a clean record. So it's basically for the police to know that I'm a shithead without anybody else knowing. I'm bringing this up so that you understand there's two different versions of your life that are kept on file. And as this situation unfolded and continues to unfold in the world right now, I wonder how much I still don't know. That's really where the anger came from and where the betrayal came from as things ballooned, as I performed my community service later on that year and put this behind me. I couldn't help but think, how many other things are a lie? And it really messed with my head. And so I'm saying this as I'm reaching out an olive branch. I'm left wing. I mean, if you want to call them wings, I guess I'm on the left one. We good?
Yeah. We're raw, baby.
You off just now?
Yeah, no, that threw me off.
Yeah. So right. Yeah, I seem so right. Yeah. So I mean, I'm a progressive guy. I believe in LGBT rights. I believe Black Lives Matter. I believe in a revamped approach to law enforcement, dealing with the militarization of the police. I think the political system is mostly a sham, and the right people are kept out of the room. The wrong people are elevated. But I don't believe personally that these are left-wing ideas. I'm using this as a way to reach out an olive branch to the right wing. I relate. I know where you're coming from, man, because what I've seen over the past couple years is, especially since the ascendancy of Donald Trump as president, is the right wing has gotten wise to the fact that the game is rigged. They are where I was in 2011, angry and looking for a fight. And I get it. I got on that subway to work every day for almost a year and a half, looking to punch somebody. And I mean that. I'm not an angry person. I'm not a violent person. I try and solve problems rather than make them worse. But I wanted to hurt somebody because I was hurt so bad. And it's not the right answer. It really took me a long time to process the reality of the situation, which is that I have more in common with 90% of the population than what divides me from them. We're almost all the same in the important ways. It's all these superficial ways that we keep getting split up. And this left and right thing is one of those, unnecessary dividing lines, in my opinion. I think I can agree with the idea that an armed populace is a polite populace, as the saying goes in Texas, and I can understand that. What I have become concerned with as I get older and a little wiser, and these days are behind me a little more, is that we can't trust a system of human beings to be better than the ones we know. We have a tendency to put all these, if someone wears a uniform, we put them on a pedestal. And if we see them on camera, we create these sort of false narratives in our minds about who they are. The right does it with Trump. The left did it with Hillary, and they continue to do it with others. In Canada, we do a similar thing with Trudeau and Harper, or Doug Ford and Kathleen Wynne in Ontario. We have this tendency to, when we see someone on a podium, we attach characteristics to them, and the people who helped me, the cops in uniform that helped me survive what I went through, and the lawyer that assisted me to stay out of prison, were just as human as the ones who kicked my ass and ridiculed me and strip searched me. And that is a hard thing for us to reconcile with. That the difference between us is disposition and really nothing more. So I didn't really get my head on straight about this stuff for another few years. I almost went crazy, and I mean that genuinely. I was suicidal in 2011. I was living on the 26th floor of an apartment building, and I would spend many nights after I would close the kitchen sitting on that balcony and thinking about what it would feel like to jump off. And I felt like there was no other place to go. I was in I was in a relationship with a girl at the time who was very dangerous to me. She was mentally unstable and bordering on sociopathic, very manipulative, and I
I
was
remember.
in a very vulnerable state. So it was a really bad situation for me. I also ended up that year was an outbreak of bed bugs, and I was infested. It turns out I'm allergic to their bites. I am one of the very small percentage of the population that are allergic to the secretion from these bed bugs. They basically, I learned a lot about bed bugs. So they inject this sort of like anti-inflammatory when they bite you, so that the wound closes up as soon as they're done. I'm allergic to that. So what I got was welts all over my body, itchy red welts. I couldn't sleep because of this. And my waking life was, feeling betrayed, feeling paranoid, and having all these feelings sort of exacerbated by the person that I was with at the time. So I reached a breaking point where I believe they call it a moment of clarity in substance abuse. And I had this moment where I could see outside of my circumstances. And I looked around at the world and I thought, you're on a cliff and you have to either step over or step back. That's your choice. So I called my mom. I did this thing. I thought, and I think this is a good practice for other people to do as well. I was 27 at the time, and I felt like my world was falling apart and no one could possibly understand what I was going through. And I think a lot of people can relate to that feeling. I think a lot of people of every stripe can understand that feeling. And I went back in my mind and I thought, where was my mom at 27? She's been through a lot. So I basically found the person who I admired the most, who had been through a lot, who had survived it, and thought, where was she at my age? I think we would all do well to do that every once in a while. And I realized that she was a single mother who had been divorced and was raising a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old at that time. She was also trying to finish teacher's college so she could have a job and a career to raise her kids. So she's in school, raising 2 kids, and poor as shit. Now, of course, historical context should be taken into account. This is the 80s. Things were different, of course. But difficult times, man. So I called her up and I said, I know where you were at this time in your life. How did you get this far? What did you do to get through this? And she said, well, your grandmother helped a lot. And she said, we had a lot of friends that supported me. But she said, it was tough. And she said, there were days where, she said, I cried pretty much every day for a year. She said, what I would do is I would have my cry in the morning, and then I would look in the mirror and I would say to myself, you're the only one that's going to get you through this. And I thought, that's great advice. So that's what I did. Every morning, I would wake up, I would look in the mirror, and I would say, you're the only one who's going to get through this. And as soon as I stopped thinking about what happened to me and started thinking about what I needed to do to be okay, to survive and more importantly, thrive as a person, I started thinking about solutions rather than all the problems. And so I have a philosophy background. That's what I went to university for. And I realized what I lacked was a proper way of looking at the world. The one that I had been living with was broken and it was mostly false. and I needed to reorient myself mentally so that my life physically could do the same thing. So I downloaded the audiobook, The History of Western Philosophy by Bertrand Russell, who basically breaks down from the guys that preceded Socrates all the way up to 1945, every European philosopher that was relevant. And I listened to it chapter by chapter and rebuilt my brain using these fine, intelligent folks who had done the thinking for me to a certain degree. It was very helpful. I don't think that that's going to work for everybody. I mean, if you need to read Eckhart Tolle, or you need, the Dalai Lama, maybe a podcast, whatever works for you. This was 2011. Podcasts weren't really a thing yet. So I counted on I built a foundation, is what I'm saying. And I think we all need to build a foundation. And from there, I encountered a very unique way of looking at things that has informed me since. I no longer see what happens to me in my life as something that happens to me. I see it as an event in the world that I get to witness. Now, the reason that that's important to change your frame of reference is it changes your thought process from the subjective to the object. I'm just here. And you begin to look at things as through more of a grateful lens, I think. It doesn't mean that I don't have tough things that I got to deal with, and I swear to myself and say this is fucking bullshit, of course. But I'm able to kind of focus myself past that point and just say, okay, this is a thing that's happening, and the important thing is that I am working through it, rather than just reliving this cycle in my mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
That took several years to kind of straighten my head around, and it's not an easy process, and I think people should start now, because I think particularly right now in our the social upheaval that's happening in North America in particular, and America specifically, is an entire country grappling with the shit that I dealt with in 2010. That's how it feels to me. They feel betrayed. They feel like the system is working against them. They feel lied to by everybody that they used to trust, and they're turtling. They're bunkering up, and they're looking for someone to hit. And I'm just here to say, your instincts are valid, but your approach is not going to get you the results you want. We do have an enemy that we need to fight, but it's not a human enemy. It's here, and it's inside every single person. And some of the people who have indulged this enemy for a very long time are running shit, and that's why things are getting so messed up. But other humans can run shit, and they're not dominated by this mentality. And I think that needs to be the goal we're aimed at. It doesn't really matter the background of these folks, or necessarily who their parents were, or what injustice they've experienced. It's about whether or not they're here to fix a problem. And I think we're going to find a lot of those people in marginalized communities, for sure, because no one knows better what's going on right now than people who have lived it for generation after generation. But the fight has to stop being so superficial, That's really all it is.
Yeah, it's so listening to the details, especially post 2010. I can remember feeling like we lost you in a lot of ways. Every time every time I saw you, something new was going on, but I didn't know about it. Like I met that toxic girlfriend, and right away I was like, "What the fuck is he doing with her?" Like,
Yeah.
it was ridiculous, and you would never, nothing like you. You had always been so like. I mean, we've all had the crazy girlfriend or whatever, but this was like another fucking level,
Yep.
and it was so difficult, and what I can tell you guys is that I didn't know that there was a problem. I didn't know that he was going through this. I certainly didn't know about the suicide or any of, like the consideration or anything like that. I didn't know anything. So all I knew is that he was moving away from us. And so he was just being a selfish prick, which obviously is not,
Partly
well,
true.
yeah, right. Like if you're being completely honest, it's both true and untrue. But
Kind of, sorry to interrupt, but like kind of
no.
what I was saying about like the difference between approaching things subjectively or objectively. That's what I'm talking about. Is like the selfish prick stuff you're talking about is me saying, why did this happen to me?
Yeah.
Now that I'm able to kind of break that conditioning, which is something that we're taught. This is how we're taught to think. That's what I'm trying to point out. Is like this is part of the problem that we have to work around. Is like once I was able to get out of that mentality of things are happening to me and just realize, like I said at the end of the last one, this is a point on a very long line that started before I arrived. Now I can kind of say I am a witness to something that's occurring, unfolding every day.
Yeah.
And so that's how I've approached these things as I've kind of matured, especially in the last, I'd say 5 or 6 years. I've seen the power of social media, both its gifts and its curses. It has both for sure.
Yeah, it really does.
And I was an early adopter, so I was on Facebook when it was a hot or not for college kids, like back in 2003, 4, or something like that. I was one of the first people on with a profile, particularly one of the first in Toronto, and I saw it evolve from lists of your favorite music to the Arab Spring, and it was quite an unexpected elevation of the whole thing. And now I see that it is just a tool like any other, and it can be used for good or ill. And I see it as a way of amplifying the common ground that we have. That's really what we're supposed to do with this thing. This is a constant public protest that we can participate in. We can drop in and out at any time. It's really powerful if we use it effectively. And so I want to use it to disseminate information, and that's kind of what I'm trying to do now.
Yeah, and so that brings up several good points. First off, please have a drink. You've been talking forever. So that's not a bad thing. This is your story.
No, of course not. Whatever.
But as a friend, when all of this was happening, it was very hard for me to get through to you, and it was easier to just go, fuck it. He'll figure his shit out. He always does, but there's a good chance you might not have. And the advantage that all of you have right now is that this is something that on a one level or another we're all dealing with together. And so what you can do is you can be a better neighbor. You can be a better friend. And you can say, hey, like, what can we do for you? And I mean, for me at the time, all I could do is say, hey, man, do you want to party? Like, do you want to get out and cut loose? And usually it was, no, I'm working because I'm a cook and they're pieces of shit and they make me work on weekends all the time. And so that wasn't really much of an option. But there are ways to try to get through it. And so now for me, what I'm able to do is I'm able to use a platform that I've created to allow Ben's voice to be heard. So whereas normally I'm out shilling my books and telling you about what I've done, and hopefully also on Chuck's Raw Reviews telling you about what other people have done. Here I'm like, no, shut up, let Ben talk, help him get his story out. And this is what's important. And so when all of this stuff, all the turmoil happened down here, one thing that I realized very quickly is, I'm a white dude. I'm on the wrong side of this, so to speak. The one thing I would say that allows me to sort of be with everyone else is I'm fucking poor. So I understand things at least from that aspect and from coming from there. But again, it became more about showing off other people's voices and letting them be heard. And that was something, especially like in the when they had the blackout Tuesday, when they were just
Right.
like, I shut the fuck up for 24 hours. I would like things, I would scroll and I would look, because
Right.
I felt like it was important for me to shut the fuck up and listen.
Yes.
So it's not like
That's
I
the
just
thing.
walked
You can't just,
away.
yeah, you can't just go, okay, it's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So I couldn't just say, you guys talk, and then leave the conversation. No, it's you guys talk, I have to listen. And so I
Yeah.
spent that 24 hours listening, and there were so many voices that didn't shut the fuck up, which I
Right.
would have loved for them to do so. But thank you.
I would
But
love for you to shut the fuck up if you
I
wouldn't
would
mind.
love for some of those people to shut the fuck up. But the fact that they didn't actually, and it was something that I wrote on Twitter, and it was, I felt so powerless because I couldn't come on and say, shut the fuck up. You're full of shit. You have no fucking idea what you're talking about right now. And what I realized in that 24 hours is this is how marginalized people feel every fucking day. Because
That's
even
right.
when they talk, it's like, we're not listening. Why are you even doing this? And that was huge to me.
Yes.
And then also when you talked about social media and how important it's been, I have to say I always hear about the toxicity of Twitter, and I feel like, guys, it's all toxic. Like, it's all toxic and non-toxic. So you kind of get what you feed, so to
It's like
speak.
drinking
Like,
from. I think of it like drinking from a pond. If you don't filter it correctly, you're gonna get sick.
yep.
It's dangerous to you, right? And your mind is the same.
Yeah.
Your mind doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's bullshit. That's why I broke down. That's why I started going crazy. Was I had to realign myself with what was true, and I had no frame of reference. I was
Yeah.
floating with no anchor, and it really fucked with me. And here's the thing. Here's the reason why I completely withdrew from my friend circle and from my family. I didn't know who I could trust, and that's how they get you. When you're alone, when you feel like there's no one that can understand that you're completely trapped in this false reality, which is how so many people feel right now. When you hear about some of the conspiracy theories floating around about COVID-19 or 5G or even the Russian meddling with the election to a certain degree, some of that is overblown as well. And when you read all that stuff, if you don't have a frame of reference, you're just looking for the stuff that's going to fit your narrative. You're looking for the stuff that's going to kind of like sing to you, make you like have that endorphin firing off in your brain. You need to the key to maintaining like a clear head through this stuff is to maintain an open mind and not take anything as guaranteed until you've seen physical evidence for yourself. So there's a really great quote that I love from Michael Forbes. He says, education, the purpose of education is to replace an empty mind with an open one. The idea is we're not giving you knowledge. We're creating methods for you to employ so you can gather your own. And if we spend all of our time telling everybody that they're full of shit and that they don't really know what's going on and that you know exactly how this is going to go down, what you're doing is you're ignoring the other 99.9% of the human race that is experiencing their own life and living their own struggles and triumphs. You're missing the entire plot. You know, and it's very important to step back for a second and just, you know what, this ain't about me. Tell your story. I want to hear it. And through this experience, the big takeaway for me was a lot of the narrative around the way that we deal with the police, the way we handle law enforcement, even the animosity right now around the defund the police movement, is the idea that the people we don't know are possibly barbarians, and if we don't have this thin blue line, it's all going to collapse. That is part of the whole problem. You don't know your neighbor. You think that anybody you've never met before is probably a monster. Well, where did you get this information from? From the same media that you claim is full of shit. And I want to say this as well. This is probably going to come off as disrespectful, and I don't mean it in any sort of disrespectful way. But I have done a lot of education on my own through spending time with marginalized people and trying to understand their side of things. It wasn't an easy task, and I wasn't always the benevolent, I'll just sit and hear your story. I have my blind spots too that I've had to work through. I have my own white privilege that I have to grapple with, and it's a daily struggle. It's the way it goes. However, a lot of the reason why we have these misconceptions about marginalized communities is because of the way they're portrayed in the media. And we all know this. To my Black and brown friends and Indigenous friends in the world, the way that you see white people is largely due to the exact same media. We are not who you think we are, 9 times out of 10. Now, it took me a long time to be comfortable around cops after what happened to me, because cops did this to me. So anytime I see a cop car, anytime I see a uniform, I still tense up. This is probably something I'm going to deal with for the rest of my life. But I don't allow that reaction to inform my conduct. I allow it to occur, and I say, this is because something happened to you in the past, but these aren't those people. And I deal with them as if they're brand new to my life. Since this has happened, I have dealt with police, a handful of times, as little as possible. I'm not going to lie, but a handful of times. And it has always been on the other side of things where I'm, I saw somebody who got beat up and called the cops so that they could deal with the situation. I was at a metal show very recently where someone was under the influence and cold cocked a girl in the back of the head and started a brawl. He got hurt pretty severely and thrown out. And we had to call the cops because he was running around outside on the street. Like, he's a damaged dude, right? But that's kind of what I'm saying is, like, at no point during this whole thing, when I was dealing with him or when I was dealing with those cops, was I looking at anybody like their actions were their character. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
When I saw the person who was causing all that trouble, I was like, this, and I was furious when he hit a girl. The one thing you don't do in front of me is hit a woman. And this is just my old school upbringing. But I was furious. And when he got beat, I was like, that's what you get, man. But I still felt sympathy for the fact that this damaged person felt that this was the appropriate response to whatever pain he had. And I wanted him to get help. I didn't want him to suffer.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of people here who have equated actions with character. And we need to get deeper than that. That goes for cops when they're dealing with black people and immigrants, and that goes for marginalized communities when they're dealing with white folks that don't understand. The best thing we can do is redirect them to a white person who does understand. And white folks who understand need to chill the fuck out with other white folks, because they ain't help.
Yeah.
I was a culprit too. I'm owning my hat, but I'm trying to be better. You know.
It's funny because that brings up a really funny thing that I've seen down here, and that is I'm at this. I feel like I'm in this infantile stage. This actually, I would call it a toddler stage, because I have these two individuals in my life who are on completely different spectrums. And so I have one yelling, defund the police, fuck the cops, blah, blah, blah. Then I have the other going, oh, defund the police? So what? We're just going to take care of ourselves? And so then I went, wait. So we're both talking about defund the police. Yes. What does that mean? And neither of them can give me a very good answer. And I'm like,
right,
there's your issue. There's your issue right there. What the fuck does defund the police mean? And I'm not asking you because obviously I've now looked into it, but I think that's something that we all need to consider. And I'm really, I guess, kind of enjoying this toddler phase, because a lot of it is just like, why? And that's why I call it the toddler phase, because you have that little kid who's always why? And it makes you want to piss them, like it just pisses you off. But that's
it does
so
make you want to piss
important.
on them, I agree.
But it's so important for us to go through and go, well, so what does that mean? What, so defund the police. What does that mean exactly? And so when I was explaining, like, well, it means that cops are not properly trained to deal with everything they have to deal with. So really what we need appropriate task forces to deal with appropriate situations. And I'm like, oh, well, yeah, that sounds like a really good idea, actually. But it's not explained that way. And of course, it's definitely not something that you can shout. Like defund the police is an easy slogan that you can shout, but you can't shout, let's create a system where people are dealt with problems. Like, no, you already lost me.
Yeah, totally. You get halfway through, people are like, oh, whatever, I'm going to get McDonald's.
The crowd already left. The cops aren't even paying attention anymore.
Right. Let's dig into this for a minute. So there's two things you brought up that I think are really important. Number one, a slogan is not a movement, and we got to stop doing this shit, man. Black lives absolutely matter, but it's not enough to say it. We have to define what the problem is and start executing on the solution, right? And I really think that that when it comes to this particular problem, it is a systemic issue. It's something that the country has to grapple with. If you can't say Black Lives Matter to people without pushback, then you have a problem, because it's an innocuous statement. It really doesn't, it shouldn't create controversy. And I think that's what the anger is about. The anger from the BLM community is about, what about this statement bothers you? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think that they should have to spend all the time doing all the work. They have enough to deal with. That's the whole point of this, is that they have enough on their plate, and they're just trying to make it, they're trying to climb the same hill as us, but they got massive baggage. All they're asking is that we lighten the load. I want to do that, and that requires a conversation. But the slogan, if all you're dealing with is a slogan without doing any deeper inquiry, you're not dealing with the problem at all. And this goes for people who are criticizing the movement. This goes for defund the police as well. I think there's a lot of people jumping on the bandwagon who are hearing defund the police and had a bad experience with police and are like, fuck yeah, get rid of those cops. They're not doing a deeper investigation. And on the other side, the law and order types, the people who, families of cops and cops themselves, are looking at this like, you want to fire me? You want to get rid of me after all the work I've done? Well, they need to do a deeper inquiry too and start thinking about, what do they want law enforcement to be? What kind of team do
Yep.
they want to be on?
Yeah.
You know? And really what defund the police is supposed to be about, in my mind, because I've been kind of saying this in various different ways for years and years before it became a thing. And it's basically, if you give someone a budget, they will find a way to spend it. And they will ask for more. Now, I want people to consider what I just said and apply that to politics, the law enforcement apparatus in your country, the way that money is allocated by the city towards various services, whatever they happen to be, the corporate greed that is ongoing and rampant beyond belief across the planet. All of the grievances that both the left and the right have can be explained with that analogy. If you say to someone, if I was to say to you, here's 200 grand, spend how you please, let me know what you got out of it, and you spend 100 grand on a Ferrari, you got to spend the other 100 grand on something substantive so you can come back to me and be like, check out what I did. Mm-hmm. Right? When you come back and you have a good story for me about what happened, I'm probably going to say, fantastic. You've shown good faith. You've shown that you're worth the investment. Here's 300 grand. See what you can do with that. Now you're starting to look for shit to do. And that's where cops are at. Their budgets have been ballooning steadily year over year for decades now. They did not start in a very good spot. And I'm saying this for Canada and America. American police forces, their origins stretch back to slave catchers. And again, this is not saying that cops are slave catchers. Like 2020 cops are the slave catchers of the 1980s. They're not the same thing. But those origins inform the way that their system is structured, in the same way that, you know, when we talk about systemic racism, what we're talking about is a racist group of people established the country, and we haven't really changed much. And that's really the problem, is that we're not allowing ourselves to evolve, even though our society, our population, our technology, pretty much everything else in our reality has evolved, and we're not allowing the people to go to follow at the same pace. It's not fair.
Yeah.
And in Canada, the police force was their origins are basically about relocating natives. That's the origin of the RCMP, which are the first real police force in the country. And again, mounted police. You know, that's not all of you. That's where you came from. But I can tell you this: the RCMP are pretty much mobilized to deal with any sort of native challenges across the country. The Wet'suwet'en situation in BC right now, where there's a pipeline trying to be forced through unceded land. So when I say that, I mean, that's not Canada. That land is not Canadian. It never was. It was never given. It was taken, stolen intentionally by a previous governing force in Canada. And the RCMP are enforcing the construction of this pipeline on land that is not theirs. This is an invasion. Like, we need to understand that. Imagine if the same company, financed by Canadian government, started building a pipeline through Lake Superior into one of the American states without permission, and then a spill happened. Right? You can imagine the sort of international outcry that would happen, and how America would have a military on the border, like, without even hesitation. They'd just be like, Canada's not our friend anymore. That's it. It's war. We can't treat everybody differently. We have to treat all of everybody with the same rights and the same respect. So this land isn't Canadian, even if it's on the map as Canada. It's not, and we need to deal with that accordingly. Now, on that note, the RCMP were formed. Like, the actual name, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, was coined when the Native Relocation Police, known as the Royal Northwestern Mounted Police, and another group of police force from the eastern side of Canada were combined to break a strike in Winnipeg in 1919. This was Canadian citizens, immigrants, and mostly war veterans from World War I who had gone over and fought for Britain and then come back and found out that their families were in poverty and that they were stuck in awful jobs that paid next to nothing, and the city was starving. It was run by robber barons, essentially. This is just before the Roaring '20s, which followed into the Great Depression. Again, we're neighbors, so whatever happened in America, you're probably getting a light version of it in Canada, historically. And
sometimes though it's an even worse version here. We just are better at hiding it, because there's even things like during World War II, what's often not talked about is how fucking terrible we dealt with our Japanese citizens.
Yes, we interned Japanese Canadians.
We were much worse than the Americans were, but
yes,
we're a lot better at hiding it. And
we're really good at keeping secrets.
Yeah, we
that's
are.
Why when people say Canada's nicer, I say no, we're just more polite. Because I've known a lot of really polite douchebags in my life. So that's kind of the way I look at. And again, when I say Canada, I don't mean Canadian people. I mean the state, the governing force that we call Canada, that shows up at the United Nations and makes arms deals with the Saudis and pushes its pipeline through unceded land. Yeah. Those are the people I'm talking about.
Ben Cook is not Canada. Chuck Pino is not Canada. We are not Canada. We are Canadian. We are people who live or were born in that country.
That's right.
And that's it. That does not mean that the decisions it makes are our decisions, but it is decisions that we have to live with and deal with. And as citizens, as people, we have to see that shit, and we have to be willing to call it out as shit.
And ultimately, my goal with telling this story and with all the stuff I do on social media, and you know, the writing I do, my goal is to show how the lie that we're told, fundamentally, the lie that I was grappling with for years, that I had to kind of reset my brain to get through. That lie is that we are vassals of a state, that we are beholden to this entity that existed before we arrived, and that we should be grateful. That is not the case. We are Canada, or we should be. We wield the power here, and we voluntarily relinquish it every day that we choose not to engage with the problems that we face. The reason that the Mounties can guard a pipeline and push it through land that is a direct invasion and a violation of all sorts of international treaties, the reason they can do that is because we allow it. And we need to start reconciling with our own power. That is what's scary for people. This is where the conflict comes from where again, I'm just a dude. I'm not the boss here. I'm not some guru. I'm just saying from my perspective.
You're not the head of Antifa?
No, there's no head of Antifa.
Well, no, I was specifically told when I started this interview that I was talking to someone important.
No, that's part of the illusion, man. Yeah.
Well, and I think what you're trying to say is you are more than a vote, and you have to be more than a vote.
Well, what I find, what I've discovered, because I've had a lot of really difficult conversations as a result of, you know, my awakening and trying to highlight the injustices that still exist in our society. What I've tried to point out to people is the difference between the enemy and the friend of the state is determined by the state, and that is a problem. I was a friend on June 25th, and on June 26th, I became an enemy. I didn't determine that. They did. And they can turn on you like it. They waste no time. And that cop in front of me, who's looking at me like I was a monster, did not care I was white. He cared that I was in his way. That's something we need to accept. That's a very important thing to accept. Because as this society changes and evolves, the lines that were usually racially drawn are going to blur on both sides of the equation. And this systemic issue that we're facing, that we call racism right now, will just reconfigure. It will change its name, it will change its slogan, and it will redraw the lines of engagement. As long as we're not aligned, and as long as we're not acknowledging and starting to accept the power that each individual has in our society, we're going to keep facing the same enemy in a different guise over and over again, which is kind of what we're dealing with. We're really dealing with, I said very early on when I was giving my background in the last part, I was talking about how I'm a student of history, particularly the rise and fall of civilizations. And the conclusion I've come to is that what we're dealing with today is a legacy of Rome. And the pitfalls and weaknesses of that empire were never fixed. They were just repurposed and given into the hands of various other people that spoke other languages. That is what led to the slave trade in the 17th century. It's why the explorers came here treating everybody that they found like savages, and incarcerating them, moving them, the Trail of Tears, the reserve system, residential schools here in Canada, the subjugation of people of color across this planet that is still happening today, Jim Crow laws in America, apartheid in South Africa. I don't know if people really know this, but Native Canadians didn't get the vote until like the 60s, I think, and they had to fight. They had to fight hard against an ignorant populace that really didn't help. All of these things are legacies of something that started a long ass time ago. And the reason that it's been allowed to proliferate and continue on the way it is that they convince us from a very early age that we don't have any power, that we're not special, that we have, that we are here at the, by the good graces of the state. And I don't think that the state is the issue. I don't think, like, I'm an anarchist at heart, but I don't think that that means no rules. It means no single person in charge. It means everybody gets a say, and the expert on the subject should be the one who speaks. So when it comes to oppression in Black communities, the people from that community should speak. When it comes to military engagement, you should ask a general. When it comes to the cultural practices of a particular Native tribe or community, you should ask the elders. We need to be comfortable not being the boss of everything, but still being the boss of ourselves. And that's a scary thought, because I think a lot of people are afraid to accept their own power, because this is normally a comic review place. Y'all know, with great power comes great responsibility. And that responsibility is the hard part. That was the part that I needed to reconcile with. And that's why I rebuilt my brain with the philosophy stuff that I did. Was I had to, if I'm going to take control of my life, I need to be able to drive the bus. So I got to learn how to drive, right? Very similar to what you were saying about the toddler state. It's really important to ask questions right now if you don't know, because the only thing that'll happen is you get more information.
Goo goo gaga.
I feel like I shouldn't keep talking now because I just said that we should shut up and listen. So say something, please.
Well, I mean, I don't. I feel like we should both shut up and listen. But I mean,
Fully agree.
again, we're two white guys who are telling you guys this. But we're also saying, speak up.
Yeah.
And I think another thing that we need to remember is we're all neighbors. And I know that sounds like some fucking holding hands, kumbaya, hippy dippy bullshit, but that's what they want you to think it means.
Yeah.
Really, what it means is that we all want similar things. Left, right, whatever the fuck it is, we all want to feel safe, to be able to enjoy our lives, to be able to enjoy freedoms. But at what point are your freedoms infringing upon someone else's? Like, those are questions that we have to ask ourselves and that we have to understand. So through these really tough times, I think we need to be really engaging with our friends.
Yeah.
We need to be open to other people's ideas. You know, if someone comes at you and says, defund the police, you say, well, what does that mean? If they go, well, I don't know. It's just kind of, well, you need to fucking learn, because I'm obviously not going to fucking listen to you. You're not going to change my mind if you don't know what the fuck that means.
That's right.
So I think the more questions we ask, the more we listen, the more we can realize that we actually want fairly similar things. And the more we break apart this this system of disinformation. Because I'll tell you something that I noticed. I had my own little like moment when a lot of these the riots and whatnot started, the protests started. And that's because I'm right between San Antonio and Austin. There was an awful lot of that stuff. The chances of it coming to my small town weren't great, but it's close enough, and my wife had to go close enough to the city that I was worried. And so I did look into a lot of that. And one thing I found was, I remember people saying it was that first real, like that first night where things really went fuck. And they were talking about people being at the White House. And I remember seeing that on Twitter, and I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm gonna go look for the real news. So I went to Google, White House, riots, protests, blah, blah, blah. Nothing. Fucking nothing. I checked the news, I checked everything I could. Nothing. So then I did go to Twitter, and I started checking the hashtags. And the hashtags were directing me to people who were on the streets, talking, showing their videos, all that kind of stuff. You're seeing all these people who were right there on the streets. And so, is Twitter my news source? You know what? At this point, it's a news source for me. It really is. And that's because so many people who are right there in the thick of it can tell you what's going on from their point of view right there and then. So that doesn't mean you have to necessarily follow their shit or believe them, but you certainly at least have to hear that information and go, right now, for them, as we're seeing it, that's fact.
Yes, absolutely. I want to elaborate on that, because there was something that I didn't get to that I really wanted to. Let's talk about narrative a bit. So we talked a little. We talked at various points over the course of the story about how the news was not giving us information correctly. So during that time when I was at my mom's house for a week, just reading up and doing my own investigation, I noticed something very important. Now, when I was in grade 13, I did a project on subliminal messaging in advertising, and I have not looked at ads since the same way.
By the way, people, he's not an idiot. In Canada, we have something called our OACs, our Ontario Academic Credit.
Right,
we do have a grade 13.
Yeah, my apologies. So yeah, I
no,
forgot
that's
about
okay. I just know we have a lot of Americans who are going, so this guy is dumb. He had to do 12
yeah, I had to go.
and he just
I was in there
called
for
it 13.
Right. Yeah. So I did a project on subliminal messaging, and it really made me look at all media differently. So with that lens, I was looking at the news, and I realized something very important. around this time is when the media started equating the word protester with riot. And there is a difference. And I've been pretty good at predicting how things are going to go in terms of the narrative since then, because I'm looking at it every day. And I had a feeling then that what I was watching was a change in vocabulary. And this is powerful, okay? The words we use have power. When you start using the words protesters set fire to cars and smashed windows, the next time you hear about a protest, you don't hear protests. You hear cars on fire, windows smashed. And you're immediately, these people are assholes, get them out of my town. What do you do by doing that? You galvanize the population against the idea of public demonstration. And you limit the engagement of the individual who may believe the same thing as a protester, but feels that the act of protesting is complicit with riots. It also means that when you see cops shooting tear gas and rubber bullets at people, your reaction is one of two things. Either this protest is legitimate, how dare they, or they shouldn't be out protesting, depending on which side of the narrative you fall on. And this just fits into the system perfectly, because now you've got, see, think about it this way. The safest way to keep people under your control is not to split them into two groups. It's to split them into 1,000 groups of two. And that's what they've done. So now it's black versus white, immigrant versus native, adult versus child, Generation X versus millennial, protester versus law and order, left versus right, Democrat versus, it goes on and on and on. And everybody's a million of them all at once. And we need each other. That's the key. That's what they don't want us to do, is to trust each other and rely on each other. Because I'll tell you this, man, the cop that kicked my ass and the cop that was laughing at me, I don't need him in my life. But the lady who guarded that door, I'd have her in my corner, man. I would trust her because she did the right thing in a bad situation, just like I did. My friends trust me because they know that I've got their back when things are tough. It doesn't matter what you do when things are easy. It doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. The people you need to rely on are the ones that handle shit when it gets heavy. And those are the people who have dealt with problems, who have struggled in their life. So your friends and family of color are the ones that you need to listen to when things get rough. That's not to say that white folks don't get it. You can, but you don't get everything. And you need to trust the people around you. They know what they're talking about. Most people are not full of shit. The idea that most of us are full of shit is perpetuated because, I'll give Twitter as an example. So here's some interesting statistics. 2% of Twitter users actually tweet, and 22% of that 2% tweet almost all of the tweets. So how many people is that?
Yeah.
How many voices are actually being like elevated and amplified? Not many. And I've learned from my time in social media, especially because I've been doing it for a while now, since I started in like early days when it was just, you know, like I was in it when MySpace was a thing, you know? And I learned, like, for everybody that says something, there's probably 100 to 1,000 that are just reading and not reacting at all, not liking, not nothing. They're involved. And I've got a lot of contact from folks who are very supportive of what I'm doing, and they don't act on Facebook, but they see what I'm doing, and they've learned a lot from it because they read the conversations, they read the arguments. It's powerful shit. But if you want to do it, this is where I'm getting to with it. There are effective communicators in this world. You're one of them, right? It's why people, you know, count on you in you know, the work you do. People count on you to be an effective communicator. And that's why I'm grateful that you're doing this right now, because your voice is needed in more ways than just promoting comics, which is really important. I'm a writer. I love
Yeah,
comic books, man. I'm writing a comic.
you're not
You know what I
offending
mean?
me.
Yeah. It's important. But there's other things that need that your skills can be used to help solve a problem. That's really important. And there are people who they can volunteer at a soup kitchen or donate to a charity, or they can mow their neighbor's lawn. Here's something I do, just something small, because I like my neighborhood and I like the people that live in it. And I figure if I got to be here, I might as well make it nice. So every winter, I have a couple neighbors over that are elderly, and it's tough for them to shovel their driveway. So I do it. I shovel the sidewalk and I shovel their walk, and they're very grateful and they're very sweet. And when they come out, they'll salt, so I don't have to pay for salt. It's a team effort, right? And I never asked them to do this. I wasn't like, I don't need a pat on the back. I just figure I need to walk the sidewalk too. So if it's going to be hard for them to do it, and I got, I'm a strapping young lad and I got a shovel, why not get it done? Not everything has to be a transaction. We got to rely on each other a little bit. We got to count on each other to do the things that we can do. And I'll tell you right now, when things go wrong in this neighborhood, I can count on them to have my back because I've earned their trust. I don't know how many people actually meet their neighbor or do something nice for them without being asked. We need to start doing that shit again.
Yeah, I totally get that. It's funny just because I'm actually a terrible neighbor, and I really am. Like I'm good to people as much as I can be, and all that kind of stuff. But sure. I remember, that apartment I lived in Keswick before I left. I had friends who'd be like, "Ooh, I'm planning on moving into your building," and I'm like, "Please don't." Why not? Because I don't want to know my neighbor.
Yeah.
We're friends, and I'm like, yeah. So live over there, and I'll visit you, and you'll visit me. But I don't want you here because I want here to be me. I want to be able to do my thing. I don't want to have to worry about you. So, and I mean, I know that kind of sounds bad, but really, to me, being a good neighbor means you don't deal with my shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Like any of my crap, you don't have to deal with it. And
but if I may, maybe this is an opportunity for you to kind of get out of that comfort zone a little bit.
Yeah, no, and I get that. It's not easy to.
I'm not calling you out or nothing. I'm just saying.
But isn't that part of what we're talking about? Is that we should be willing to call each other up, and we should be willing to have these uncomfortable conversations.
Yes. If we're going to get any further ahead, we've got to talk about the elephant in the room, whatever that elephant happens to be. And there's a lot of elephants. There's more elephants.
There is a lot of elephants.
Like fuck.
I have a good buddy of mine. He's black. He's from San Antonio. We have worked together a lot. He has I was his editor on one of his books, and you see so much of this on social medias right now, and that is if you think this or this, just fucking delete me now. And it's like, really? Because you're creating that little bubble there. I have seen him, and he is a very staunch leftist. He has certain beliefs, but he is amazing. And by the way, Adrian Petty, shout out to you, dude. He will jump on other people's things, and he'll be like, why do you feel that way? And I'm like, man, dude, that dude is being like, not low-key, high-key racist. This is a very good chance for you to be like, motherfucker, but instead he's like
flaming cross on the lawn kind of level.
Yeah, why do you feel that way? Oh, okay, well, because the statistics I've seen are this, and this, which completely speaks differently than what you're trying to say. So where did you get your information? Well, is that real? Is that not? And he's so patient. And I don't find that I can be that patient, but and that is a skill that I don't have. But what I can do is I can allow those people to speak and to be heard. And so
Yep.
someone like you who is doing some work that I really appreciate and that I would rather not come in and re-verbalize, I can instead say, hey guys, this dude has something really interesting to say. Why don't you listen to him for going on 4 hours? And if he doesn't convince you, then maybe he's wrong, or maybe you weren't listening. There's a
Right.
lot of maybes in there, but at least you attempted to pay attention and learn something from it.
Right.
And so I think we need to also get out of that me bullshit and realize who is the person who needs to be heard right now. Who is someone, and sometimes it will be you. Or
Yeah.
sometimes you'll realize, I'm not the guy for this. I'm not the right tool. You are a
That's right.
tool. We are all tools. How are you going to be used properly in this society? And
That's right.
sometimes it's a mouthpiece, and sometimes it's a megaphone.
Yep.
And which one are you? Figure it out and do it.
And to add to that, for those that do the speaking, it's very important. This is something I learned over a lot of unfriendings over my time. I used to be, my frustration and my anger at this situation that I went through, and then I'm continuing to. I mean, I'm that person that runs into the mix, man. Like that's kind of who I am. This is just one of the major examples, but I still do it. And I used to be quite an asshole, and I've learned. So, to all those other communicators that are trying to fight the good fight and do the right thing and disseminate information, true information, or as close to true as possible, be patient and understand that I think what a lot of people are looking for that are doing the good work, like your friend, Adrian, you said?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. A lot of people that are doing the good work like Adrian don't have what they're looking for is someone to admit they're wrong. I think that's the wrong instinct. I think if you're looking for someone to admit to their folly, you're barking up the wrong tree, because you got to look at yourself in the mirror and say, would I admit to it in public? And the answer is probably no most of the time. It's an embarrassing thing to admit you were wrong. It's hard to do. What we need to do is conduct ourselves in such a way that the conversation we have with them resonates after it's over, and that it's something they think about after the fact. That's been my experience dealing with people. Now, I have a lot of friends from all different spectrums, different walks of life, all over the place. We don't agree on everything, of course. But when I talk to them about issues, if they don't understand, they know they can come at me full board, fists a swinging, and I will handle it as calmly and carefully as I can, because what this story that I've been telling today taught me, and what I've tried to incorporate into my character as a person, is I can take pain and process it really effectively. I don't let it really mess with my head, and so I'm trying to use that for good.
Yeah.
I'm trying to become the punching bag for angry people to get out their frustration, so that we can get past the emotion of it and start getting down deep into the reality of what is making them feel that way. And when I can do that effectively, which sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, everybody's different. But when I can pull that off, the ripple effect of that is as vast and as powerful as the ripple effect of the damage that was done to me and the damage that's being done to people across this continent. Positive energy has the same feedback loop as negative. It has the same outcome. It will amplify itself and produce more of itself. So we have a choice as individuals to act on that knowledge. So I'll give you a great example. When you read about the police brutality, that the history of police brutality, that Canada and America have. And when you hear about things like state-involved horrors like the Tuskegee experiments, or the Tulsa massacre, or residential schools in Canada, or the various different coup attempts and successes that have happened across the world that were financed by the American government and through proxy the American taxpayer. You have two ways to look at this. You can be angry and feel like it's not something that you can do anything about, and amplify the problem by yelling and screaming about it, or saying it's not a problem at all. Or you can say, this cannot continue, and start working towards positive change in whatever fashion you can. Your anger is justified, but it's energy, and it needs to be directed. And if you direct it through a brick into a window, what you're doing is you're making more work. We need to be making less work. That's not to say that I'm against the riots. I think, Kennedy said that if you make a peaceful revolution impossible, you make violent revolution inevitable. And I think we're watching that at play right now. There's a quote that I really love. This is the last quote, I promise, by Schopenhauer. He's a German philosopher. He said, truth comes in 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. And third, it is accepted as self-evident. I think we're in stage 2. And I think if you look back at any of the movements that have emerged over the last 20 years, you can see that 3-stage process occurring, whether it's gay marriage, or it's reconciliation here in Canada with the natives and the Indigenous folks here, police brutality and the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow in America. We're seeing that happen. We're seeing people laugh at, that's not really a problem, ha ha ha, making jokes, making memes. Then people get violent. They start yelling and punching each other. And then we go, you know what? You were right. And we move forward. Now, of course, there's always going to be some ignorant fuck who isn't listening and just wants to be the shit disturber, right? We have to be careful of those people. But I think if you're really paying attention, you'll notice that most of them wear suits and sit in front of podiums. And they're the ones we should ignore. I mean, vote, for sure. But the other 364 days of the year, you should be working to limit their authority and take control of your community and try and build something better. We should understand that the places we live today were just dirt roads. Not so long ago, just a bunch of random people who were like, this is where I'm going to stay for now. And now, look at them. This is the legacy of effort, positive effort. And we should be a part of that. We've kind of been distracted by convenience and by a very powerful system of mental conditioning. And it manifests in a lot of different ways. But our neighbors are the ones that we need to count on at the end of the day.
Yep.
Even if we rely on cops, they're not going to be there to stop the crime. They're going to be there to clean up the mess. If you want a crime stopped, you trust the people next to you, because they'll help you out.
Yeah. Do you have any final thoughts?
That's about it. Yeah. I don't know if there's anything else to say,
Yeah, you know what? At this point, we need to shut up, and we need to let people have the discussion that hopefully we've helped to initiate. So
Agreed.
Feel free to go in the comments. Feel free to comment there. Also, if you need to, you want to get in touch with us, you want to actually talk to us, feel free to mention that in the comments. We'll be more than happy to give you some way, whether you find us on Twitter, you find us on Facebook, you email with us, whatever that is. If you feel like there's a conversation that you'd like to be having, questions, hell, even debates or arguments, We have to be open to the negative and the positive.
I would love to hear from people who think that I'm off base. I want to hear where that is, and I want to be able to correct wherever I'm missing the point.
So please feel free. Again, don't worry about subscribing or any of that bullshit. Please share it if this is important to you, and if this is a conversation that you think matters. Please talk about it. I don't even care about the likes or any of that or dislikes. Fuck, dislike all you want. I don't give a shit. But comment.
Well,
Talk. This is
think
what we need to be doing.
I think people should like and subscribe because you're doing a good thing, man, and that should be supported. And hopefully, this isn't the last time you do this.
I appreciate that, and I don't believe it will be. I thank you for helping to inspire it, because now I'll be having more conversations, and of course, they don't always have to be about this. There's going to be a lot. There's a lot of different conversations to have, and some will be more volatile than others. So this will continue on. Thank you so much, Ben, for coming on here. I really appreciate it. Really appreciate your story. Everybody, take good care of yourselves. Take care of your neighbors. And again, my name's Chuck, and I do give a fuck.